Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. I'm Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and I'll finish this intro next year.
All right, we'll stop here and pick up the next installment of the podcast a year from now.
You'll know it's the next part because we'll all have new haircuts.
Yeah, exactly. Be slightly more weathered as we go through the discussion. So we are here in a bonus episode for our recently concluded season on the films of 2014. And thank you to our loyal Patreon subscribers if you're listening on the Patreon page. And if you are listening later, check out the Patreon where you could have listened to this episode like 3 months ago. Come on.
Plus all of Dave's nudes.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
By David Rosen on Patreon. Check that out. And we always appreciate the subscribers there. So as we went through the season on 2014, I think this movie came up a bunch of times in relation to other things that we were talking about. So we kind of got to the end and discussed what do we want to add on, and decided to go ahead and talk about Richard Linklater's Boyhood, which, Jason, I know is a favorite of yours. I think in our epilogue episode, you mentioned that it was a possible choice for your pick. But of course, it's no ping pong summer.
All right, Josh. I had a few other good choices too in there, Obvious Child and some other things. But, I'm really... Yes, this should have been my pick if we were just basing it on the best movie that we hadn't talked about this year. But I'm glad we got around to it. Everything upon this rewatch holds true. It's absolutely ridiculous that this didn't beat Birdman for Best Picture, that Linklater didn't win Best Director, that it didn't win Best Editing. What are we doing here? This is a referendum. I think I said it in that episode. One of the greatest missteps in Oscars history to me.
I mean, there are many missteps in Oscars history, as we've discussed.
One of the greatest, Josh.
One of the greatest, yes. And no, I agree. I mean, and for me, even more so, because looking at the Best Picture lineup is just atrocious. The lineup of nominees, as far as I'm concerned, and my feelings on Birdman. So I'm with you on that. It's absurd that this didn't win Best Picture or Best Director. And I will say that maybe over time, this is a movie that more people continue to appreciate more so than Birdman.
Josh, do you have any, you haven't given us your opinions on Birdman the rapper.
I don't. I think we mentioned Birdman the rapper in our episode.
Yeah.
Dave knows. I have heard of this person, but I could not name any of his songs.
You brought up this whole appreciating it over time, and that's what this was for me, because the first time I saw it, I was like kind of blown away that he was able to put this together. And now watching it 11 years later, I'm blown away that he was able to put this together, right? And you're watching it. This is a point I always want to make about Linklater. Last time I watched Dazed and Confused, I was like, if I read this script, if anyone read this script, you'd be like, no, this doesn't work. It's not a clear 3-act structure. Characters come and go as they please. This is all mishmash. It doesn't work. But because it's Linklater and he's such a genius, he makes movies, and I think this is one of them, that no one else could make. Like, I don't think anyone else could have executed this or Dazed and Confused like he executed it. And I think he might be the best humanistic filmmaker. You're not getting big set pieces, right? You're getting little glimpses into worlds and human interactions and emotions. And this is the quintessential example of that.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Richard Linklater as well. And I agree. There's so many films and so many bold swings that he takes that you think this could easily fall apart or just not turn out very well. Like, hey, you tried and it didn't work out. And he's rather prolific, so he can definitely make these experiments and afford to have something that doesn't work out as well and then move on to the next thing. But this is something that did obviously work out very well. Anyone who doesn't know, this movie was shot over the course of 12 years from 2001 to 2013, and shooting for, I think, like 3 or 4 days, once or twice a year, with the main cast as we follow the life of this young boy who then grows up into a young adult. Mason, played by Ellar Coltrane, and also his parents, played by Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette, and his older sister, played by Richard Linklater's daughter, Lorelei Linklater. And yeah, what's amazing is that any of the elements that he puts into place at the beginning could have fallen apart. You know, this kid who's 6 years old could have decided at 10 years old, I don't want to be an actor anymore. And you're not going to force some kid to be in your movie for the next 8 years if they don't want to. Or Ethan Hawke or Patricia Arquette, who were established actors, could have retired, could have gotten some TV gig that they couldn't have gotten out of, or who knows what. And yet it all stayed the way that he meant it to, and was able to be, you know, and it's cohesive too. It feels like a story, even though it is episodic and it does sort of drift from one thing to another, as in life. It does also feel like a complete story.
But he's a master of that, right? Apollo 10 and a half, the Before series, right? Like the whole thing, I always think episodic is like a cheap insult to movies or scripts, because like you said, life is episodic, right? You know, today I went to physical therapy. Now I'm doing this podcast, right? You know, so all that fun stuff. So I don't know, man. The way he's able to weave them like and do everything is just, I can't believe he's able to pull this stuff off. It's such a high level of skill. And Josh, you used the word, like you called it bold swing, which is so right on the money, but it's like the quietest bold swings you in film history, right? Like, you know, Sinners this year, big, bold swing, right? Boyhood, bold swing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's one of the appealing things, is that you figure this movie that covers 12 years of people's lives is going to have all of the biggest events in their lives. And it doesn't. I mean, there are some segments that feel like they are momentous events in these people's lives, but even those are quiet versions of it. And there's plenty of points in the movie where in another kind of movie, you think like, oh, something bad or dangerous or sad or something like that is about to happen, because that's what you expect, like dramatically. But it doesn't necessarily. It's just daily life. It's just things move forward, and that's how it is for most people. But it's not uninteresting to watch because of that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is like it could be if it wasn't him doing it, right? But like he just executes at such a high level. It's just, I don't know how he pulls it off, because you like I said, if you just read this on page, you'd be like, what? Like you're okay. You're talking about like you like taking photos. Great. That's it. Like, that's the whole scene. And it's like, but it's so good when the way he's able to put them all together.
Right. I mean, and that is, as you said, like the case in so many of his movies. I mean, some of his movies are much more high concept and have a lot more plot and a lot more events. But so many of his movies are just as low key as this movie, and just as fascinating to watch in the way they depict those small everyday moments. So this movie was also pretty successful at the box office for a nearly 3-hour drama about life. It grossed $57.3 million on its budget of $4 million. A small budget, which of course was also parceled out over the course of these 12 years by IFC Films, which is another thing. Thank goodness IFC Films remained in business for 12 years, because of course you can't always count on that from a film production company or distributor back then or now. So they kept on financing it, and it paid off. It was nominated for 6 Oscars. It only won 1. It won Best Supporting Actress for Patricia Arquette. As you said, it did not win Best Picture or Best Director. Ethan Hawke also nominated for Best Supporting Actor, Linklater for Original Screenplay, and it was nominated but did not win Best Editing. It did, however, win Best Film, Best Director, and Best Supporting Actress at both the Golden Globes and the BAFTAs. So those organizations recognized it at the top, but the Academy was all in on Birdman.
Yeah, except in the one award it should have won, which was Best Actor for Michael Keaton. So, way to go, Oscars! You really fucked your own fucking thing up, you fucking assholes, fuck faces. Might as well have the Las Vegas film critics pick the winners.
You know what? I should have noted down what this movie won from the Las Vegas Film Critics Society, because I bet that we did a better job with it than.
Yeah, Josh, you guys really killed it with your awesome winners here. You did pick Michael Keaton right there. You got Reese Witherspoon. You got Birdman for cinematography, Josh. That's what you got there.
I'm sure I didn't vote for that.
Best director. You guys nailed it. Inarritu, Josh. You guys really crushed it. Best ensemble, Birdman. Way to go, Josh. You guys are on fire right now. Let's see. Best picture, Birdman won. You guys suck, Josh. You're trash. Oh, fuck you, Josh.
And I wasn't even in the society.
Well, I certainly didn't vote. I might have voted for Reese Witherspoon. She was very good in Wild.
Birdman looks like it won nothing from you. It came in, Birdman. Boyhood came in second for Best Movie of the Year. I will say I'm happy that our old friend Francisco Menendez won the Cinema Heritage Award this year. But everything else, you guys suck, Josh.
Well, again, I didn't vote for Birdman, I guarantee, in any of those categories. And I always supported giving awards to some local Vegas people. So I'm glad we did that for Francisco Menendez.
Selma, 7th place best film. Imitation Game, 8th place best film. Really,
Selma was pretty good. So
I've never seen it.
This is really not. You know what?
This is a bonus episode referendum on you cucks in the film society here in Las Vegas. You're gatekeepers, and the only thing you're keeping behind that gate is bags of shit.
I had thought maybe we would have, because oftentimes we make not necessarily the best choices, but different choices than the Oscars do. So I thought maybe that's how it worked out, but it didn't. Nevertheless,
wait a second. Are you going to admit that you guys are rolling around in bags of shit there at the Las Vegas film? So
I don't think we devote enough attention to our activities to bother doing that.
I'll supply the bags.
Throw in some votes in there.
You guys have already supplied the shit.
Years-long grievance campaign against this organization that he's not a part of.
Cucks.
So other organizations, many other critics organizations did give this Best Picture and other major awards. It's a huge list. But again, the Oscars did not acknowledge it. It was basically universally acclaimed by critics. It has a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. And so many of these reviews are just extraordinarily positive.
And Josh, let me jump in there. It appeared on more critics' annual best of lists of 2014 than any other film, including the most first place votes. On 536 lists, it topped 189 of them, which is a record, which you are not a part of.
No, I did not. I was looking. I had it as number 3, I believe, on my top 10 list.
But that's okay. I meant your stupid Critics Society. You guys blew it.
Oh, right. Yes, the Critics Society. But on my personal list that I published that year in Las Vegas Weekly, I did have it at number 3.
I guess you're better than Mike Lee, who called it the definitive independent film. You know better than he does.
Well, I mean, that's a fair statement. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the best independent film. It's just the definitive because of the way it was created, which I could be on board with.
I think, keeping off on this tangent here on this bonus episode about Boyhood.
Keep on it.
I mean, could you not argue that he's made 3 or 4 movies that are the definitive independent film? You could argue Slacker, Before Sunrise, probably Dazed and Confused as all the definitive independent films.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the idea here is that this movie is made in a way that not even, as great as those movies are, they're all made in a more conventional manner. And this movie is made in a way that no other movie really is made.
I guess so. I mean, Slacker's kind of just out there the way. I think there's nothing really normal about that, but I love that movie too.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's not about whether they're good or not, but I think they're produced in a way that movies are usually produced, and this is not the case here. And that is something that really blew people away. I mean, we now are very familiar with what this movie is. And I think even probably by the time we all saw it, we had heard so much about what it was that we knew what to expect. But going in, if you don't necessarily, I mean, maybe you'd read a specific, like a little description of the production, but to not really know how that's going to be experienced, I think would be a pretty amazing thing to witness. So Manohla Dargis.
I was just going to say, what an exciting adventure to never know where it's going to go. Even they would say, like, the way it was developed is like he had the ending of the film done, and they shot the beginning, and then each successive year he would talk to the actors of what was going on there in their lives, and that would inform the script for that year. Pretty cool, seat of the pants, no safety net, a way to make a movie.
Right. And again, the fact that it still comes together in a way that seems like a satisfying narrative is impressive, given that they went through it like that. So Manohla Dargis in the New York Times said, radical in its conceit, familiar in its everyday details, Boyhood exists at the juncture of classical cinema and the modern art film, without being slavishly indebted to either tradition. It's a model of cinematic realism, and its pleasures are obvious yet mysterious. Even after seeing the film 3 times, I haven't fully figured out why it has maintained such a hold on me, and why I'm eager to see it again. There are many reasons to love movies, from the stories they tell to the beautiful characters who live and die for us. And yet the story in Boyhood is blissfully simple. A child grows up. This, along with the modesty of its physical production, its humble rooms, quiet moments, ordinary lives, can obscure Mr. Linklater's ambitions and the greatness of his achievement.
I just, like I said, like you're watching these scenes unfold and you're like, hey, they said, do better in school. Hey, they said, is anything going on with you and your girlfriend? And it's like the most basic, simple stuff, but it's like so effective. There's the one scene, my daughter's 11 now, and there's the one scene where Ethan Hawke takes the 2 kids out, and they're like, he's like, how was your week? And they're like, good. He's like, how was your week? Good. And he like pulls the car over and he's like, we're not doing this. And he's like, and he says like, I'm not going to be that like weekend dad that you just say good to, and that's that. But like the other day, true story, like I'm in the car with my daughter, and how was school today? Good. What's her homework? Stuff. And I stop the car in the middle of the street and I go, we can just sit here. I don't care if people beep at us. If you want to, if we're going to talk, we're going to have real conversations. And I think she was so embarrassed. She's like, fine, I'll talk. But you got to do these things as a parent, Josh.
I guess so. So you did that.
I mean, I was at
by Boyhood.
I'm not saying it. Yeah, I think it was like an impetus of like, like the last 2 years, whenever she's like, what'd you have for lunch? Food. I'm like, no, Scarlett, you have to talk to me. Like, what, and I get it. She just got out of school. She wants her time to kind of decompress. But yeah, we were just at a stoplight. It was red. And I was like, I'll just sit here. I don't care if it turns green. And then, so, sometimes you got to do these things. There's a fun story about Arnold Schwarzenegger, where if Patrick Schwarzenegger and his siblings like didn't put their sneakers away, he would like take their mattresses and throw them out on the lawn. And it was just like,
that does not sound like a fun story at all.
I mean, it worked. The kids all cleaned up after that. So,
they were terrified of their giant father.
Everybody take your shoes off.
I did not expect an Arnold Schwarzenegger impression in this episode, but thank goodness. What if Arnold Schwarzenegger starred in Boyhood?
Mason, you have to do your work so you can get into college.
What a different movie that would have been. But this movie was pretty good too. So
it would be a good subplot. I had a love child with the maid.
Right. Yeah. It would have been a lot of Boyhoods, I think, maybe in that version.
Right. What's your dad up to? I'm governor.
Wow. What a fascinating film that could have been. Mick LaSalle in the San Francisco Chronicle said, nobody had ever done this. Other filmmakers, most notably Francois Truffaut and Linklater himself in the Before series, have filmed the same characters over the course of many years in various movies. But these were always snapshots of the current moment. It's a totally different experience to see characters aging scene by scene, or to watch a brand new movie and feel like you know more than the actors. This makes for a different kind of movie experience, one that brings a sense of mystery and awe to routine moments. At 166 minutes, it flies by, and you don't want to leave that world. But one thing is certain, this isn't the last word. People will be writing about this film for years and looking at it to discover the lost history of our time.
Yeah, I mean, so when we were talking, I was telling you that I'm like, it's 2 hours and 45 minutes thereabouts, and it's a very fast, you can't cheat it, but it feels like it moves very quickly for that type of length of a film. And I agree, man. I agree. Like, this whole idea of like going back and looking at it, this is a movie that was it truly, as I got pissed off at Inarritu for saying that they were walking on the tightrope, this is truly a tightrope act that like, and this is one that really has never been done before, right? Like no one's ever done this as far as I know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what he's talking about with Truffaut is the Antoine Doinel movies, starting with the 400 Blows, where he, over the course of 20 years, made, I think, 5 movies following that same character, starting as a teenager through adulthood. And that's not the same, although it is a pretty impressive project. There's other reviews that compare it to the Up series.
That's what I think you and I would think of. Yes.
Right. I mean, I thought of both of those things, but again, those are separate movies. The documentaries from Michael Apted following this same group of people starting from age 7. And I think the last one was maybe 64.
Every 7 years.
Yeah, every 7 years. So again, they're individual different movies. There's gaps, long gaps in between them. And then the Before series, those 3 movies that have also gaps of like 9 years in between. But I don't believe anyone else had done anything like this.
A single movie
that I'm aware of.
Right. A single movie spanning that time and breaking the story down, which is now doing again with the adaptation of Merrily We Roll Along.
Yeah. I mean, and I think you have to be someone who has that level of, I mean, he was already established when they started this film and had the ability to go to like IFC and say, here's my crazy idea, give me some money, and could get that and could convince people like Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette to sign on board for this. So, you have to have a certain amount of experience and clout to do that, but you also have to have the artistic ambition and the devotion to keep coming back to it and not say, oh, I had to spend 3 years making a Marvel movie or whatever. So there are not a lot of people in that position to begin with.
I'm glad you brought up IFC, the distributor, because what chutzpah and balls to do this. It was a $2.4 million budget, $200,000 allotted each year. But how many times do we hear about movies that have started and then there's a regime change and they get thrown out? So for them to have that kind of backing of a filmmaker is so empowering. And I love that. So that's pretty cool. Also, I like the fact that Linklater told Ethan Hawke that if he died, that Ethan Hawke would have to finish the film for him.
Right. Well, he was younger when he was doing this. That Merrily We Roll Along project seems more likely to need that to happen, but Ethan Hawke isn't involved. And Ethan Hawke isn't that much younger than Linklater. So.
I mean, dude, we're going to get to him, but Ethan Hawke, what a role he's on and Patricia Arquette too. Like since this movie, they've kind of exploded, I think. It's interesting because we talked about like, would we see that with like J.K. Simmons and Whiplash? And then I think these two like really captured those heights after this movie.
Well, it's a showcase for them as much as it is for Ellar Coltrane, I think, because it's at one point, right? I mean, I think one of the ideas that Linklater had that if things didn't work out well, it's like, oh, well, you can make this movie into motherhood or fatherhood,
right?
Because the adult characters are just as interesting and go through just as much change, and you could follow them over the course of the years if the kid had to fall away for whatever reason. But better that he didn't. So finally, I figured I'd get Richard Linklater's hometown. So Marjorie Baumgarten in the Austin Chronicle said, the development of personhood as it is experienced, day by day, year in and year out, is the subject of Boyhood. In this sense, Richard Linklater has created the ultimate coming-of-age film, one that transcends the usual constructs of the genre, which often posits one big event or trauma as the kick in the rear that propels a character toward maturation or a greater sense of the world beyond oneself. Linklater's newest film, a true masterwork, eschews this Big Bang theory of dramatics in favor of the 1,000,001 little things that accumulate daily and help shape who we are and who we will become.
Is there a negative review on this, Josh? I mean, I know it's like
there is one, I think, on Rotten Tomatoes, but I mean, I sometimes with these will find if there's a major critic who had something negative to say, and there are certain criticisms that maybe we'll get into later that are not even necessarily like overall the movie is bad, but
yeah, of course,
certain elements maybe are not as good. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't really any notable dissenting voice that I felt was worth quoting.
100 out of 100 on Metacritic, best reviewed film of the 21st century.
Yeah, Metacritic is a bit more selective.
Legitimate?
I mean, it depends on how you look at it, but they are, yeah, Rotten Tomatoes, there's, 300 plus reviews of this on there, and I think Metacritic only has 50. And there's no negative reviews on Metacritic. There's no negative reviews among the top critics on Rotten Tomatoes. So again, it didn't seem like there was a major voice in there on the dissenting side. But that's not to say that like no one dislikes this movie, of course.
People are stupid idiots, as we learned.
And I mean, and anything that is this widely acclaimed is going to have some level of backlash because, people are just resistant to joining the bandwagon.
All of the Linklater favorites that we have would always have backlash because they're not traditional, what you would expect, like popcorn movies. And this is long and different and small, even though it's large. So I think, that if anything, that's a compliment to him.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's, I don't want to say about any movie, even a movie that I absolutely love, that it's like not fair for someone to dislike it or to give it a negative review. I do think this movie is great. And I think there's at least, one element that I think is maybe a bit frustrating or not great that we'll talk about later. But overall, I think this is a brilliant film.
What a tease.
And so I think it's fine, that other people disagree. So there is more than one on Rotten Tomatoes. It looks like there's maybe 4 or 5 negatives, including one from the Daily Beast, which looks like the only kind of notable outlet here. That was.
Were they upset that they put up Obama signs or something like that? So,
no, that's not a right-wing outlet,
isn't it?
No, it's not.
I take it back.
And maybe this explains our Las Vegas Film Critics Society votes. One negative review from the local Las Vegas character Victoria Alexander. So
that, if you know her, that is quite.
If you know her, all the listeners of this podcast very familiar with Victoria Alexander.
She's a bit kooky. She's nice. The last time I saw her was when I was doing a guest spot at a comedy show because my friend was doing it there at the Ahern Hotel, which is shockingly not a place I would fit in because it's a super right-wing hotel. And I didn't even know that when I took the gig, but it was a gig and I was, just doing comedy. But like I said, I could see people who lean that way not necessarily liking it. And that's not to say all conservatives would. I could just see that. Or people who just want that traditional Bad Boys 2 style movie,
Yeah. I don't need or want to read Victoria's thoughts.
She's in your group, bro.
I know. I don't pick who's in the group, but as I said, maybe if she was anti-Boyhood, it's a small enough group that one or two votes can sway the winners. Obviously, my anti-Birdman stance was not enough, but that might have been part of it.
That's because they were rolling around in more shit than you were.
Yeah, I all right. So, Jason, you saw this movie when it was released and enjoyed it?
I loved it when it came out. We all knew, film nerds, like this movie, and there's nothing ever been like it before. And like, I was just like, I couldn't understand how he was going to do it. And then I saw it and I'm like, how the fuck did he do that? So, no, I still love it. I still think it's great. And I don't know. He just really, like, I didn't love Hitman last year, which is a little bigger story for him. But I think he's the best small storyteller that there is in film.
I mean, he's fantastic. And I think, to me, he is comparable to like Steven Soderbergh in that they're both very prolific and they take on a lot of genres, but they have whatever genre or whatever kind of story they're telling, it's always going to be a unique approach that you don't think any other filmmaker can come up with. And Linklater's a more personal filmmaker than Soderbergh is, but I don't know. I just think of them as kind of on the same level.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've been listening to the Big Picture episode on the Robert Altman Hall of Fame, and you always think of like PTA as a Robert Altman guy and everything, but I think you could really compare Linklater too, in like making all these different types of movies and having so many characters overlap with one another. And again, telling real human stories, I think.
Yeah, and Altman was also very prolific, worked in a lot of genres, and took a lot of experimental swings that didn't all work out. Whereas PTA is the opposite of prolific.
Right.
And, it also does take big swings, but it has a lot more riding on each one, I think, because he makes films infrequently. But
let's ask Dave when he saw it.
Yeah, Dave, were you a fan of this right away?
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw it back when it came out and I loved it back then. I didn't realize till I was looking at my I have my old pre-Letterboxd ratings in a document and I gave it 4.5 stars back then. And so I was like, oh, wow, I even loved this even more than I realized.
Yeah. I mean, I also loved it, saw it when it was first released. As I said, it was on my top 10 list for the year. And I have been, a huge fan of Richard Linklater, as Jason, I think you have been, and probably all of us since Dazed and Confused or whatever, and when we were in high school watching those movies. And I think that he's someone that I would have said is one of my favorite directors for a decade or whatever leading up, or more, 15 years leading up to this. So I was excited about it and it lived up to my expectations, which is not always the case. I mean, Linklater does have some duds, but this is definitely not.
This is definitely a top 5, maybe a top 3 for me, favorite director to this day.
Yeah, I mean, he's still certainly churning out. I too was a little mixed on Hitman, but I mean, I think he's always, whatever he does is always something that I'm interested in seeing. So anything else you want to say on the background of this movie, Jason?
Yeah, Josh, when they were developing it, the father was going to save the world from Skynet.
That's good. If anything could be a running commentary on this episode, it's the impression of Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think, is what.
Why not?
Linklater won the Silver Bear at Berlin that year. As you said, he won a ton of other awards. Cast and crew would meet maybe once or twice a year, film for 3 or 4 days, but the productions team spent 2 months in pre-production and 1 month in post for each of those. And then I like this quote from Ethan Hawke. I thought Before Sunrise was the most unique thing I would ever be a part of, but Rick has engaged me in something even more strange, time-lapse photography of a human being.
Yeah, I mean, and going back to what you said there about like the pre-production and post-production, like the other impressive thing as I was watching the credits, like, oh, this has the same costume designer and the same production designer and all these people who would have also, along with the actors, had to have been on board for the entire 12-year process. And Linklater is just that guy that he can get people to go along with him for something like that.
I mean, well, Inarritu was too.
Well, they didn't take 12 years to film Birdman, thankfully.
Yeah.
We'll come back and talk more of our general thoughts on Boyhood. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this bonus episode for our season on the films of 2014, we are talking Richard Linklater's Boyhood. And I mean, this is such an epic film, right? I almost don't even know where to start. But is there like a segment or an age of Mason that is like your favorite here in this film?
No, I don't think that there is, because I don't know how you can separate them, right? Like, I like seeing everything from like those early, impish little kids where they're spray painting or riding bikes, all the way through him dealing with the angst of having to choose college and going through a breakup. I think the strength is probably the relationships with the parents. obviously, like you said, two heavy hitters in Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette. So, I mean, they're really, really, really MVPs of this movie.
Yeah, they are. And I think, it starts with Mason, and given the title, you expect that it's going to be just all about him, and it's not. I think you get a lot of insight into the parents and into the sister too. I know Lorelei Linklater has kind of complained over time that her character was not given as much depth or development. And as a teenager, she wanted to leave the movie at one point. But I think, I think it's fair for her to say, but on the other hand, I think that character actually does get quite a lot of development, given that she's not theoretically the main character. And you see a lot of what she goes through and how she reacts to all the situations and the various bad men that the mom gets involved with, and it affects her just as much. So, there could have been more if it was her movie, but I think given that it's not her movie, she actually gets quite a lot.
What a diva. I mean, that's funny that like she wanted to leave the movie because it's her dad's movie and everything like that.
Right. Well, I was wondering that because, of course, she starts and she's 8 years old or something. I mean, she's only a little older than Mason, and gets to be a teenager. And like, you're about to get this, Jason, or you were even kind of talking about it a little. Like, what teenager wants to like do a thing with their parent like for them? And you could just imagine like, Dad, do we have to make that movie again? and I was just sort of thinking that as a funny thing, but she has said in interviews, and I think Linklater himself said it too, that at like one point she asked if they could kill off her character so she could leave the movie.
God.
And he said no.
That'd be so dark, but that's an interesting point, specifically because you mentioned the mom and the drunk husbands and all that stuff. And that's really the only conflict in this movie. Every time you think like something's going to happen, nothing happens, right? There are all those times of like Mason, hey, be careful when you drive. And you're like, oh, is that a harbinger? Is he going to have a car accident? And he never does. He goes through a breakup. He takes pictures and comes in second place. Like, that you could say there's no conflict in this movie, and that's an issue. And you could make that an issue for a number of Linklater movies. Apollo 10.5, I still have no idea how he made that movie so good.
Right, Apollo 10.5 is basically like a 100-minute monologue.
Yeah, it's just a list of stuff that he liked, and
it's so good.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. He pulls this stuff off that, like, I know, like, Slacker is too. It's just little vignettes of weirdos like walking around Austin and doing stuff, and you're like, what? Why am I so interested in this, right? So, you could argue that hey, it's 2 hours and 45 minutes and there's minimal conflict, but he's just he executes on such a high level that I don't think you mind it,
Right. And I not only did I not mind it, I appreciated it. I had seen this before, but of course not since it was first released, so I didn't remember every detail. And there's a scene, you mentioned the thing where somebody says something about driving, but especially there's a scene where when he's kind of like, I think 12 years old or something, he gets very tall very quickly. There's some of the scenes where I'm like, how old is Mason? He seems like he's older. So I think Ellar Coltrane had a big growth spurt. But I think they're meant to be in like 8th grade, and he goes with his friends and they're like older brother to this half finished house under construction, and they're drinking beers and like throwing around sharp objects and breaking boards, and they're talking about sex, and some girls are going to come, and you feel like in another movie something would happen. Someone would get hurt, the cops would show up and they would get arrested, they would, someone would get beat up because they're arguing with each other, or girls would show up and there would be some kind of like weird sexual assault thing, or all sorts of stuff that you expect out of a coming of age story. And none of that stuff happens. They just sit around and they drink beers and they talk shit and they break some boards, and that's it. And then they go home. So I appreciated that because it wasn't contrived drama.
Yes, but was it any drama?
I think it was enough drama, right? You do get a sense of a little bit of tension there because the older brother characters are being kind of assholes to Mason and Mason's friends.
Well, that's their job. They're the older brothers.
But I think there is like you spend enough time with Mason at that point to kind of feel for him. Like, oh, he's being pushed around here. I mean, there's a one scene where he does get literally pushed around in the bathroom by some bullies. And we don't know, like in between segments, maybe he did get bullied further or whatever. Like, and any of those experiences might have shaped who he becomes later in the movie. So I think there is some tension. And some of the tension, if you haven't seen the movie before, is that expectation of like, uh-oh, is something going to happen? What could happen to these kids right now? And it doesn't. And it's a release of tension.
Yeah, to me, like I said, all the tension comes from the asshole stepdad, and then the not asshole stepdad, who just kind of becomes the subject of a Bruce Springsteen or John Mellencamp song about days gone by. The good old days and everything. I mean, look, here are the things that I think you could argue beyond that as the negatives of the film. Those two characters, I get it. They even say she has a pattern of like drunken, dudes that she goes for. Like, I thought they could have maybe separated those two dads a little more, in their development. And then the other thing is like the kid acting, up and down throughout. It gets better, it gets worse, it gets better, but they're not Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette, those two.
They're not, but I thought they were both pretty good. And again, I think going back to like Lorelei Linklater being roped into this or whatever, I think she gives a pretty good performance and she's as good as Ellar Coltrane is. So
yeah, I'm not saying one kid's better than the other or worse than the other. I think they both just show limited range of what they're capable of. And that's just what it is. It's okay.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, and I think also Linklater in shaping the movie the way that he did and kind of coming in each year and talking to the actors, part of that is probably understanding, okay, what can these two kids handle for these characters to be doing in this segment and what couldn't they handle? And maybe, I don't know, maybe the lack of big dramatic moments for those kids comes down to, I don't know if the kids can carry the big dramatic moment and who's going to have a big speech about, where her life has gone or whatever. We know Patricia Arquette can have that moment, when Mason's going off to college and he's just kind of like, oh, mom, what's up? And she gives that big speech.
Yeah, she's got a few of them in there.
It.
She does great. She's a deserving supporting actress winner. And while I was researching her, I was delighted to find out I don't think we ever consider you don't think of her as like a Meryl Streep, but you look at all this stuff, not only a working actor and a very good actor, but she's a very awarded actor over the years. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, she has that whole, she's got a few of them, right? She's got the first scene with Ethan Hawke where they're talking about, what, kind of boundaries with the kids and if he wants to be a part of their life. Bill, the asshole husband, who I thought really, he was a legitimate, like, hateable villain right there,
He was. And I mean, I think like what you were saying about those bad dads being differentiated, I think that segment with Bill, which is really over multiple segments as we see them kind of having flirted or whatever, and then they're married and it seems like things are maybe going all right, and then it deteriorates. That was a good little mini arc in the movie and shows her making these bad choices or maybe not realizing what's going on under the surface of this guy when she decides to marry him. So when we get the second guy, who I wasn't ever clear if they were married or just together, but the somewhat younger guy who's like a military veteran and then he becomes a corrections officer and he seems to be going into a similar pattern, maybe not as bad. He never seems to be actually like physically abusive, but it does seem a bit redundant, especially because one scene with him when it's clear they're together and Ethan Hawke shows up and they're having like a very nice conversation about, oh, the kids are doing this or that. And hey, you're doing work on the house. And it seems like, oh, maybe she found a better guy this time. And it turns out that she didn't. It is a little redundant. You're right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I like, he's the founder of the Austin Film Society. And it's fun how much of Texas he's able to showcase in this movie. Throughout the years, 12 different years. They're always moving. She's getting jobs in small towns. He's going to, University of Texas. Just some cool stuff to see all around that state there.
Right. I mean, and Linklater is, of course, a big Texas guy. And as I said, the hometown paper there, and he's known for being living in Austin, but he grew up in other parts of Texas too. And Apollo 10.5 is a big showcase for this, as well as Dazed and Confused and Everybody Wants Some. I mean, he's very much a hometown guy. And I think that's true without this becoming without it becoming some sort of big statement about what is it like to grow up in Texas or live in Texas or whatever. But we do have that segment you kind of referenced where the Obama is up for election and is running for president, and they're putting out the Obama signs, and they go to the house and there's the guy with the Confederate flag or whatever. And you can see that tension. And that's a reflection of real history, obviously, to the point where maybe when they were filming that, they didn't even know if Obama would win the election. And I mean, I liked that, and the pop culture reflection as well. Like, they do things that they focus on. There's, that whole segment where they go to the midnight release of Harry Potter, and like, you got to hope that maybe Harry Potter is going to still be a big deal when this movie comes out 10 years later or whatever. And it was, but even if it hadn't been, I think that would have been an interesting time capsule. And all of that stuff, the video games they play, the music they listen to, is a way to sort of capture what people were paying attention to at the moment beyond just like the specific character story.
I really like the Harry Potter stuff because it's those midnight events, like, which I never participated in. I wasn't a Harry Potter person, but like, I like, that's so specific of a phenomenon. It was fun to really see that and how that worked. As far as the music, am I correct in saying each year they chose music of that year to kind of showcase, the vibe of what was going on?
Yes, I was actually going to bring that up because at first I thought he might have cheated a little bit, but no, it's all right. They did it correctly. I was especially excited to hear the Hives, which I'm a big fan of. But yeah, no, everything was what would have been, and of course there's some like classic rock in there as well, but like all the newer songs were of the moment for sure.
Right. I mean, and not only on the soundtrack, but there's a segment where they're listening to Lady Gaga. Right. Samantha is a fan of Lady Gaga, and she shows the music video to her dad's new wife or whatever. And it's like just as Lady Gaga is becoming popular and stuff like that. So it's integrated there as well. Or Mason talking, I think at one point he says to his father about the girl that he likes, like, oh, she's not into the music that I'm into. And you can get to that Mason has music taste informed by his father because, like you said, he brings in all this classic rock and tries to shape his son's tastes in a way, and he's a musician. And so, yeah, all of that. You have Charlie Sexton, who's an actual musician, as
Bob Dylan's the guitarist.
Right, yeah. And I just saw him in a documentary about Lucinda Williams being interviewed. And he plays Ethan Hawke's roommate, and then you see him, he comes back much later, and you're like, oh, there's that guy. He's still playing music. Good for him. Ethan Hawke became an insurance adjuster or whatever, but this guy's still.
I know. Did that make anyone sad? Because Ethan Hawke was like that whimsical, like, I'm the cool dad, but he wasn't really in the kids' lives. I'm a musician. And then, like, he's in khakis and a polo, and he's making lots of money. He's got a wife and a kid, but he doesn't really play music anymore. And like, he's talking to Mason about responsibility. And like, that's what you should do as a parent. But at the same time, it was a little sad seeing him lose that, creative, artistic flair.
I guess, but at the same time, it didn't seem like he was unhappy. And I think that's a worthwhile portrayal to be like, hey, look, here's a guy. He didn't lose his love for music, and obviously even stayed friends with Jimmy, and they got to go hang out at Jimmy's show and everything. So I feel like that's fine. A lot of people who have creative interests, it doesn't have to be your career. Sometimes it can be more rewarding if it's not, and you're just doing it for fun and you don't feel the pressure to like make money from this thing. Dave, I feel like you know about this sort of thing.
Yeah, sure, a little bit. I was also a little disappointed in him seemingly becoming a little bit religious as things went on, which was,
I found that to be interesting because I didn't think he was becoming religious. I thought he was just acquiescing to.
He's doing it for the wife.
Yeah, for the wife.
Yeah.
The wife's parents are super fun, like old school Texas, homesteaders. And Mason, come here, son. I got a present for you. And it's like, my daddy gave this to me, and I'd like to give it to you. And it's a 12-gauge rifle, but he's so proud of giving him this rifle. Like, this is so meaningful to the grandfather, That's a good sequence there.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like we're talking about Texas, like that's a major element of life in Texas, I think. And these characters are in a world that's a lot more progressive or whatever than we think of as average Texas life, right? I mean, Patricia Arquette becomes a college professor. Ethan Hawke, he's a musician. The kids are all into sort of alternative culture. And so to get that time of, hey, here are these the religious grandparents who are into shooting, that's a big element of life in Texas. And I did like too that even though Mason and Samantha probably aren't into that and are definitely not religious, like when they go to practice shooting, they're like having a good time and they really enjoy it because, hey, that's part of Texas culture.
Yeah. I agree with you, Josh. I noticed the Patricia Arquette professor scene when she is teaching, and I always feel like, and I don't know if it's like an acting trope, but I always feel like whenever someone plays a professor, whenever they're lecturing, they go so big, and she does it here, where it's like, everything is so grandiose, like, and that's why this theory is so important to this, and next week we're going to get into this, and I'm like, not. There are other ways you could teach, that's a minor quibble, but I feel like that happens very often when people play professors.
Right. And of course, you just get a glimpse, right? That scene is just Mason shows up as she's finishing her class and sits in the back, and we see the last thing she says. But I think we get that too in however many scenes earlier when we first see Bill and he's the professor and she's taking his class. He also kind of like makes these big pronouncements about stuff. And you get the sense that that's something that maybe draws her to him. And so even though she's no longer married to him and he turned out to not be a good guy, maybe she's influenced by his teaching style in some way. But yeah, I agree. And this isn't a movie about teaching. This isn't a movie about college psychology classes or whatever. So it's a bit superficial in what she talks about in that scene or what Bill talks about in his scene. But yeah, it's yeah.
What about Patricia Arquette's friend who throws the other professor who throws the party with her? And I'm like, are those two hooking up? We got a little lesbian love affair going on here. And then when Mason goes to college, she's like, hey, you need a ride? She was just thirsty, bro.
Yeah, I did not get, I realized that you were always complaining how I point out homoerotic tension in movies, but I did not get any of that between her and Patricia Arquette. But I definitely did get that moment with her and Mason where she's like maybe a little drunk and she's like, hey, what's up, Mason?
Did you feel it, Dave, with the two, we're professors. We should explore each other. Let's be sisters. So
maybe not that thick, but it could have been there a little bit. Yeah.
So, Josh, you were asking me if I had any favorites. I really like the small town stuff, and I like when they're, kind of the last stuff when they're out in the desert and everything. Ethan Hawke and Mason on their camping trip, I enjoyed a lot. Did you have any favorites? Or to me, like I said, it all just kind of washes over itself together.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are some moments I did like. And one thing that this isn't even a criticism of the movie, but I liked the dynamic that they have with their like brief step siblings, Bill's two kids who seem nice and they all get along. And it seems like they have this sort of bigger family. And then when she leaves Bill, Sam says, what's going to happen to those kids? And she's like, I don't know. I called their mother and I called Child Protective Services, but I'm not their guardian and I can't do anything really beyond that. And Sam says, are we going to ever see them again? And the mom says, I don't know. And we never see them again. And I'm sure that's a realistic reflection, but I kind of was like, I wish I'd seen them again one more time.
Because on top of that, the woman who helps her, Patricia Arquette get out of that situation that they go to live with and her little daughter, we do see them again at Mason's party like 10 years later. So there is some interesting like kind of work there. But yeah, I would have liked to see them again, those two kids.
Yeah, you wonder like Mason and Samantha are old enough at that point that they could attempt to be in touch with them or whatever. Like maybe they would have reached out. And I don't know from a production standpoint if there was a reason that the actors weren't around or whatever. But I do think it is realistic that even if you want that, and even if you hope to see them or stay in touch with them or help them, sometimes that just doesn't work out. And we have to just hope that their father isn't busy abusing them, that maybe the mother, we never know what her deal was and why she wasn't around. Maybe she showed up for her kids or whatever. But that's what happens in life. You lose touch, and even people who seemed really important to you at one point, you just don't hear from them anymore.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because, I was telling you how much I enjoyed the Billy Joel documentary that's on HBO. And literally today, I called my friend Pat Ellard in Boston, who I went to college with, because we saw we saw a Billy Joel concert together in college. So like it just was like, oh, I haven't spoken to this guy in years. And he picks up and he doesn't say hello. He goes, Lino. And he just calls me my college nickname. And it was like really great to just pick up with a person that you haven't seen or spoke to in years. And it was all because of a piece of art that we both responded to together, you know? So
yeah. And I mean, we don't necessarily see whether Mason or Samantha, because they do move around a lot, as you said, have that. You know, there's in like the first sequence, because right in the first sequence, that's when they first move. And Mason has that friend who he's graffitiing with or whatever. And we see them driving away. And the friend is riding up on his bike and he just kind of waves. And like, did Mason ever talk to that kid again? We don't know. Probably not. He was only 6 years old. But yeah, I mean, that's totally true. So I did want to bring up the one thing that, and this has something that other people have criticized, and the one kind of false note, and it's a very small element of the film, but there's this character who starts out as like some sort of maintenance worker. They're putting in a new septic system, I think it is, in the house, and he's telling the mom, Patricia Arquette, about what kind of pipes you should have or whatever. And I thought at first in that scene, like, oh, these guys are sort of like putting one over on her to get her to pay more for, like, you know, it's like William H. Macy selling you True Coat in Fargo or whatever. And she says, okay, you're right. I'll take the better pipes. And then she's like, you know, you're real smart. You should go to college. And that movie, she sounds so condescending, that moment. And instead of a moment of her being sort of condescending or just something we forget about, like 4 scenes later or something, when Mason is about to graduate or go off to college and they're out at a restaurant, suddenly there's this guy again, and he's the manager of the restaurant, and he speaks much better English, and he tells her, like, you changed my life, and you inspired me to go to school, and now I'm, you know, managing this restaurant. And it was just so self-important of the movie, and unnecessary. It had nothing to do with, like, we could have never seen that guy again, and it wouldn't have mattered. And it just felt like a moment that, and it does highlight, as some other people pointed out, and I don't necessarily think this is a problem as much, but the lack of characters of color in the cast overall. And I think it's fine because it's reflecting this one family's experience, and maybe they're not experiencing, you know, interacting with people like that as much, which I think is realistic. But to have the one character like that have this arc, it just really struck me the wrong
way. Okay.
You have any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I definitely noticed it's all whites, you know, it's all whites except for that crew right there, right? You know, so
right. There is the scene where they're messing around, the kids are messing around in the unfinished house. One of the kids is not white. But yeah, otherwise yes.
Yeah.
I thought that moment was very silly too. And you know, it's just liberal shit, basically.
Right, but in a very like smug way, I think.
Yeah.
And that's not what, I think that's the other thing, is like, that's not what the movie is overall. I think it avoids that. Even the scene where they're putting up the Obama and Biden signs doesn't feel that way. Right. You know, it's about it's about the dad and you can imagine his sort of dilettantism, and he decides he's a big Obama guy for like a minute or whatever. And so I thought that really worked well. And this is the opposite.
Yeah.
So did you have any criticisms, Jason?
I mean, I kind of mentioned my criticisms about all that stuff, you know, just kind of
the bad dads.
Well, that was repetitive, right? Because, right. And I don't think the second dad, you know, there was enough there. Like, he was an interesting character in that he was like a war hero, you know, kind of like really at the top of who he was. And then, you know, life just kind of took over. Like, whatever, I don't want to say peaked, but maybe he did, right? And he's a corrections officer. And even that whole speech where Mason's like, you're not my dad. He's like, you're right. I'm here. I'm the one paying your bills, you know, and this and that. Like, I just don't think we needed the alcoholic on alcoholic situation. That felt a little repetitive. And like I said, up and down acting from the kids, but that, you know, you're taking such huge shots here. So that said, like, should have won director, should have won picture, should have won editing, no doubt in my mind, and also probably screenplay as well. So
yeah. I mean, I would have been totally in favor of that. So, Dave, any thoughts you want to share?
I mean, you guys covered it. I did, one thing I made note of is when Ethan Hawke is gifting his kid the Beatles Black Album CD. I liked how realistically smudged it was for a used CD that he probably got at like a Goodwill or something, you know? Yeah, a lot of movies, it would be like this perfectly pristine. They just went out and got it for the movie copy. And that just looked like a totally used copy you'd hand down to someone.
Well, was it used? I thought the idea was that he had curated it himself, right? It's this fake album of solo Beatles songs that he made into like a Beatles album. And in fact, the wife, right, doesn't she say at one point, like, oh my God, so many hours he spent on this?
Yeah, I wonder about that too, because he doesn't seem like someone who would know how to burn and print a CD, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, a lot of bootlegs of that.
Right. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that whole concept of the Beatles, if that's a thing, like the Beatles.
You're not familiar with the concept of the Beatles?
The Beatles Black Album, as they call it, the idea of putting together songs from their solo career to sort of create a Beatles.
I thought the Beatles Black Album, wasn't that like when Danger Mouse just remixed all of like the Beatles stuff?
That
like,
was something, yeah. That was the Gray album. It was called the Gray album, I think.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, maybe that is a thing. I'm not sure. I didn't look into that. But I definitely got the impression that within the context of the movie, it was meant to be sort of like a mix that Ethan Hawke's character had himself put together.
Are you going to open?
Maybe somebody else made it and he like passed.
What are you going to open that with?
I don't know.
Wonderful Christmas Time by Paul McCartney.
They mentioned a few songs. He mentioned Band on the Run, I think, as the one that opens.
I think they play that
side
in
two
the background.
Or something like that. Yeah. I don't know. But hey, the art of the mix CD, right? Another time capsule element here that has been sort of lost.
Oh, yeah.
So do we want to rate this then, Jason, out of 5 lives passing us by?
That's a good and sad one, Josh.
I kind of, that's the other like feeling I get from watching this movie about like, oh man, life really just sort of like goes and it's gone already. And like,
do you miss it? Do you want to relive some of it, Josh? Or?
No, I don't. But like, it also just gives you that sense of like, you know, whatever you had, you know, it's over kind of thing.
Well, Josh, I'll tell you what I had. A good experience watching this film. I give it 4 lives passing us by.
I agree. I also give it 4 lives passing us by. And it certainly was just as powerful to me, I think, this time as it was the first time. So, Dave, how do you rate this?
I'm going with 4 as well, you guys. Let's all be in lockstep here.
That's always nice for us to agree.
Get to the chopper!
We'll come back and talk about the legacy of Boyhood. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year in this bonus episode for our season on the films of 2014. We are talking about Richard Linklater's Boyhood. And Linklater himself has continued, and we've mentioned some of these projects, he's continued to really be a bold, artistic risk taker and make personal films. Jason, you mentioned Apollo 10.5, which I love. Everybody Wants Some was the next film that he made after this that I think is actually kind of underrated, which was the spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused about the college experience that I think is a really entertaining film that I rewatched.
And not only that, Josh, a spiritual sequel to the Matthew McConaughey launch into the new leading man launch, because Everybody Wants Some, as a performance by another captivating Southerner, Glenn Powell.
Yeah, and it's interesting, though, because Glenn Powell, you're right, he is in that and he's a lot of fun in that. But then it took like another several years, I think, for him to have that breakout versus McConaughey.
It took another, if Days was like 91 or
93, I think.
Okay, so 96 was probably Time to Kill was the big breakout. So
maybe.
Who knows? Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Glenn Powell has become an important collaborator for Linklater with Hitman, which you mentioned, that Glenn Powell co-wrote. And, but, you know, he also takes these kind of studio jobs. He directed Where'd You Go, Bernadette with Cate Blanchett, which is one of his worst reviewed movies that I actually think is pretty good. And Last Flag Flying, Jason, I think you and I watched that together, the sort of weird pseudo sequel to The Last Detail with Steve Carell and Lawrence Fishburne.
And one of his most financially successful films, the Bad News Bears remake.
Which is all not very good. But,
right. We like, I mean, Slacker is, if you were which I've done in my head, creating a curriculum for American independent film class. Slacker would definitely be on there, right? Dazed and Confused, the Before trilogy, maybe the greatest trilogy in film history. I mean, he was doing crazy stuff like Tape, which was shot on digital, I think in the late 90s. It's all a single room thing. So, like you said, he's always doing like really, really interesting stuff. School of Rock is, I think, my favorite of his big movies. And then Bernie's just another delightful, underrated piece, I'd say.
Yeah, I love Bernie. And I mean, I was just talking about what he's done since Boyhood, but of course, throughout his career, he's got so many good films. And I think, yeah, like you were talking about something like Tape that people barely remember, although weirdly, there's a Chinese remake of that just came out. But overall, it's not one of his most memorable films, but an experiment. And he's always, I think that's why I think of him like Soderbergh, because they're always like, what new thing can I try? What have I not tried before? Or what's going on right now that I might be able to use for my artistic purposes? And he has 2 movies set to be released this year, Blue Moon, which is another collaboration with Ethan Hawke about Rodgers and Hart, the songwriters, and Nouvelle Vague about the making of Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless. I'm very much looking forward to both of those coming out in the next few months. And Jason, you mentioned his other ridiculous long-term project, the adaptation of the musical Merrily We Roll Along, which is meant to be filmed over the course of 20 years. And if Linklater makes it, he'll be in his like early to mid 80s, I think, when that movie comes out. And I hope that works out. But to me, it's interesting. Like we talked about how many things could have not worked out with Boyhood, and they all did work out. Whereas already with Merrily We Roll Along, they had to like redo it because they recast one of the main roles.
Ooh.
And they had to scrap their original first scenes that they shot.
Who did they recast, Josh?
Well, they had originally cast Blake Jenner, who is Everybody Wants Some. And
he beat his wife, right?
Yeah. There was some pretty unfortunate allegations that came out about him. So he was dropped and replaced with Paul Mescal. And so they had to redo those scenes. So already the like passage of time thing gets a bit screwed up.
Yeah, Paul Mescal's great though. So we like him.
Yeah, he is. And Beanie Feldstein and Ben Platt, these are the 3 main stars of that. And I hope it turns out well, but I think it just points to how much of a gamble something like Boyhood was and how much of almost a miracle it was that it worked.
I think you're right. I mean, also like you could say that about a number of his films. The 2 movies that might be out before that, Josh, after the 2 this year, he's got biopics in the works on John Brinkley and comedian Bill Hicks. So we'll see.
I'm sure
if those
he's always got
through.
a lot of different projects, that he's trying to make happen. And I hope to see those. And then I hope to see whatever he does. I mean, I will be excited to see anything from him. Really.
Yeah, I listened to a great podcast with him once. It might have been like the Indie Film whatever podcast. But he was on and they were talking about recommendations, for movies. And he called it the Texas Trilogy, which are like the seminal Texas movies that kind of helped put it on the map, which were Last Picture Show, the Bogdanovich movie, which is great. He was talking about Tender Mercies, which I think I mentioned to you guys is one of the best acting performances I've ever seen, the one that Robert Duvall won the Oscar for. And then he talked about Last Night at the Alamo, a movie I had never heard of, or a filmmaker I'd never heard of, Eagle Purnell, who does like a lot of that kind of like docu-narrative where it's narrative, but it feels like documentary. It was really interesting. And I just think I would like love to just be a part of the Austin Film Society. Please take me and let me watch your stuff.
Yeah, and he is very, he has stuck with his Texas identity. I think he just did a documentary recently for HBO that was part of a series, and it was about like a prison town, I want to say, in Texas. I haven't seen it, but he's very much like a representative of that culture in a positive way, whereas I feel like there's a lot of negative impressions from the artistic community, perhaps, of Texas now, and he's a bright spot.
Well, not just that, Texas boomed especially Austin as a film town, but that's mainly because of him, right?
Him and Robert Rodriguez seem like big figures there.
Yeah, and he was the one who started it, and then Rodriguez kind of helped elevate it. But that's pretty cool to be there and help create an entire industry for people,
right? And to not give that up and just go to LA or whatever, I think is speaks to his integrity there. So Ethan Hawke, again, as you said, like certainly has had a continued like amazing career since this. I mean, he is a longtime Richard Linklater collaborator, but also fantastic other stuff. I mean, I think from post Boyhood, First Reformed is probably the most notable there,
So
as
good.
far as something acclaimed and excellent. I really like him in The Truth, the Hirokazu Koreeda film that he made in France. But he's in such a variety of things too. He does TV stuff. He's on, does Marvel. He's on the Moon Knight TV series, but he also did that kind of weird show, The Good Lord Bird, which I never watched, but got a lot of good reviews. He's also a director. He's written novels. I mean, he's sort of an amazing Renaissance man, it seems like, and yet remains this very humble, like affable presence if you see him in interviews.
I think he's only ascending at this point in time, right? Because he's found another career path as like a go-to horror guy between like The Purge and the Black Phone movies and everything. But it's interesting because you're talking about this as like this Renaissance man, and now he's got like these mainstream presences. To me, he was always like the indie icon, like leading man of the 90s, right? And that was part of the charm of him and Uma Thurman together and everything. But, besides the Before series, you think of like Reality Bites and everything. So I think that's where I place him. I'll throw another underrated recommendation in that we might have talked about on our Lumet episode, Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, which is a pretty amazing film.
Yeah, I mean, and I think he is still that indie presence that you're talking about because, as much as he does like the Black Phone or whatever, or takes mainstream roles, he's very prolific. And so he'll do these indie roles or he'll work as a director or whatever alongside those major, like mainstream films. And he's able to straddle both of those worlds, which is not always an easy thing for actors or anybody to do. So I think that's impressive.
And we like his daughter on Stranger Things.
Yeah, she's almost eclipsed his fame in certain circles, at least. So, I mean, you said Patricia Arquette really took off after this, but it's interesting to me. It's like her movie career really didn't take off after this. You look at the movie credits she's had after winning the Oscar. She was the one who won the Oscar from this, and it's pretty minimal, but she's done very well on TV. It seems like in like limited series and stuff like that since then.
Oh, she's crushing it on there, man. Right now on Severance, before that Escape from Dannemora, both Ben Stiller collabs right there. I didn't realize she won an Emmy for Medium, but when I say she's got the Academy Award for Supporting Actor, a BAFTA, 2 Primetime Emmys, and 3 Golden Globes, 2 Screen Actor Guilds, I just didn't realize that there was so much, reverence for her. But I always liked her in Lost Highway and Flirting with Disaster, of course, True Romance from the 90s. And she's going to stay in that limited series space. It looks like she'll be in that Murdaugh, Alex Murdaugh, who murdered his wife and kid family miniseries, and a few other things, it looks like. So.
Yeah, I mean, she's those true crime miniseries are huge right now, so she's getting a lot of work there. Escape at Dannemora was one of those, and The Act, which she also won, I think, an Emmy for. I haven't seen any of those. You're a Severance fan, though, right, Jason?
I am a Severance fan, and I'm a Patricia Arquette fan, Josh.
Yeah, she's very good, but yeah, certainly the TV world is where she has thrived. Both Ellar Coltrane and Lorelei Linklater haven't exactly had big acting careers, but have both done a handful of things. Right after this, Ellar Coltrane got some roles in decent sized films, including The Circle with Tom Hanks and Barry, the weird Obama biopic, and also was in The Good Lord Bird, that TV series, alongside Ethan Hawke, and has some indie stuff, looks like, on their IMDb page coming up, but not like a huge breakout. But again, when you start this at 6 years old, it's like, is that even what you want? Who knows?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I know you said there right there, and he is kind of, those are his pronouns or their pronouns.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm working on it, guy. So, but I think had we known that during the filming of Boyhood, I think Linklater would have put that in there as a subplot.
Right. And maybe Coltrane, they didn't know that either at the time. I mean, they're still a kid, essentially, even at the end. So it's maybe not something that's always people are able to articulate at that young age per se. I mean, some people are, I think, but some people take longer to kind of come to that. So, but still working a bit. Lorelei Linklater also, I love seeing, I don't know if this is just because this is what she can get as far as roles go, or if she is a big horror B-movie person, but she does a lot of these low budget horror movies with titles like Camp Blood 9 and stuff like that. And I think that's a lot of fun. She's actually worked with some of our Las Vegas associates who are in that world, Jeremy Settles and Nick Woods, both working on some of these films, Desert Fiends.
We should ask Dave, we should ask Nick about his experience with her.
Yeah, absolutely. I just saw Desert Fiends in the list here. I was like, oh yeah, that's the thing next to.
Yeah, and Skate to Hell is another one that I think Desert Fiends I think is out maybe, and Skate to Hell is coming, but from this I think those are both Sean Phillips, who I don't believe is a Vegas person, but is a big indie horror.
I think you're probably right that that's what she's able to get, but in my mind, I want it to be like Richard Linklater was always choosing to go on this indie path, and she is choosing to go on her own indie path of horror right now. So
I hope, yeah. I mean, I think there's so many of them that it has to at least partially be a choice, and it's probably fun for her.
Well, she's getting a lot of work in that. You know, once you're in that world, it's you can keep working in that world. Josh.
Right, that is true, and it's probably easy to just roll from one of those into another. And those filmmakers, cast the same people, and they end up being very prolific. She's also an artist. You can go, I looked on her website, and she has a lot of gallery exhibitions. She has a degree in art. I did find her LinkedIn and mentions experience in recent years as an art school teacher and an administrative assistant as well. So, she's living a life. She's just doing normal stuff.
Do you think when she teaches, she's in front of the class like, painting is the most important medium?
We'll never know. But anything else you want to say about the legacy of this movie?
I enjoyed a quote from Harold Adelman, who is a philosopher who called this movie the Huckleberry Finn for the 21st century. I found that to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. And Mark Twain, another Southerner with a distinctive sensibility. Maybe Richard Linklater in that tradition.
Well, I say.
All right. Well,
I say. That's it.
So. Southern Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That's it.
Boyhood. And that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can watch us age online and on social media.
Or in real life if you go to Dave's events. But if not, we're at Jason Harris Comedy on all the things. And go for Jason on Letterboxd. Follow us on Instagram at Jason Harris Comedy or The Trivia Party or Eat This Comedy. That's all. No, awesomemovieyear.com, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and the Gram.
I have some old things at joshbellhateseverything.com. I'm at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Blue Sky and on Letterboxd. And if you're on Letterboxd and you watch this film or any of the movies we talk about on the show, tag your review Awesome Movie Year. We would love to know what you think. And check out our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod.
And again, if you are listening to this on our main feed and you want to check out early access to these bonus episodes and other episodes, as well as content from Piecing It Together and Dave's music career, where can people check that out, Dave?
Patreon.com/bydavidrosen is where you can go sign up for the Produced by David Rosen Patreon and get all that great content and early access stuff.
And again, we appreciate everyone who signs up there, all your support. Very welcome. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.
Ugh, this is going to be a long one.
Mm-hmm.
Your fault.
No, it's fine. It's fine.